Good afternoon, and welcome to the July 30th State Digital Equity Plan and Capacity Grant Program Stakeholder Briefing. On behalf of the State of California and the Department of Technology, we thank you for being here. We will begin the meeting shortly. Please use the chat box to share your name, job title, and affiliated organization as more folks are coming in. Sounds like we have most people in here, so let's begin. A few housekeeping items. Next slide, please. This meeting is being recorded. We will be posting the recording of this meeting slides and transcripts to the Broadband for All portal. You'll find that link in the chat very shortly, and we can repost it throughout the meeting too. So presenters, please cue Amanda to advance your slides. For folks, please select side-by-side speaker mode when slides are being shared in order to see our ASL interpreters. Please note that closed captioning is available. Throughout the meeting, we will have the Q&A box. Please note there is time allocated at the end of each agenda item for questions. So please use the Q&A box to type in your questions related to that portion of the agenda while the presenter is presenting. We will temporarily turn off the chat while the presenters are speaking so that no questions are lost in the chat, but chat will be available during the discussion, and we'll make sure to turn that back on. Additionally, at the end of each agenda portion, please use your raise hand icon on Zoom or *9 if you're calling in by phone. Our team will elevate you and request that you come off mute or on camera. So please, next slide. Thank you. We have quite a packed agenda today with an opportunity for discussion after each agenda section. We welcome you to turn on your camera and mic to participate during the discussion. In a moment, we will begin with welcome remarks and a recap from Deputy Director Scott Adams from CDT's Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. Next, Alex Vaughn, Principal from Broadband Equity Partnership, will share an overview analysis from the State Digital Equity Plan implementation and Digital Equity Capacity Grant Design Questionnaire, specifically on feedback regarding the centralized services and capacity subgrant program design. As the OBDL Engagement and Operations Manager, I will then present an overview analysis from the questionnaire, specifically on feedback regarding stakeholder engagement. Sean Doherty, Director from Broadband Equity Partnership, will share information regarding the NTIA Competitive Grant Program. And then lastly, Deputy Director Scott Adams will talk through key milestones and close the meeting. So as a reminder, at the end of each presentation, we will have time for bi-directional conversation, and we welcome you to participate. Again, please feel free to come off mute on your mic and turn on your video at that time. So first, I would like to introduce Deputy Director Scott Adams to provide a brief welcome and recap of the SDEP implementation and capacity grant program design thus far. Thank you.
Amanda, you can advance the slides. And just wanted to say thank you and welcome. Thank you and welcome to everybody here. I see many familiar faces who we've engaged and partnered with over the last, year and a half probably, and seen some new faces too. So just wanted to state at the outset that the state's digital equity plan and the implementation of the capacity grant is really a group effort, and the digital equity plan was developed in concert with community of stakeholders here in California, and the successful implementation will require all of our collaboration. So just welcome everyone to a seat at this big table, which is really focused on our shared goals of closing the digital divide in California and fostering digital equity throughout the state. Next slide, please. So we wanted to give you just a quick recap of where we are at this point in time. We have obviously the NTIA, who funded the development of the state plan, had approved it. On May 23rd, we had the first of a summer's digital equity stakeholder briefing series to really talk through and give folks a heads up that the state was submitting an application for the NTIA capacity grant. That briefing occurred on May 23rd. Many of you attended, so thank you very much. What followed was on May 28th, the state submitted its digital equity capacity grant application to the NTIA, which was very high level application acknowledging that here in California, further design of both the implementation of the digital equity plan and further design of the capacity grant was going to be done in partnership and in collaboration between all of us. Kind of to the next significant thing that occurred was between June 18th and July 2nd, the Department of Technology and our office put forth a digital equity implementation and capacity grant design questionnaire. And the purpose of that questionnaire was to really engage you all and from your perspective and where you were sitting, seek your input on how we were thinking about both structuring the digital equity capacity grant and how we could improve ongoing collaboration during the implementation of the capacity grant program and the digital equity plan. The final thing we wanted to just update you on is that we are currently in the formal curing and merit review process of the state's application for the $70 million capacity grant, which will help us implement the digital equity plan. We think we're at the end of the cycle, not at the beginning, and that the award will be fairly imminent, sometime in the next 1 to 4 weeks before the end of August. Next slide, please. And so just real quickly, we wanted to share the kind of the draft structure that we shared at the May 23rd meeting of how the CDT and the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy are envisioning structuring the capacity grant program. And that, of course, begins with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. They are the federal grant administrator. The Department of Technology is the grant recipient and administrating entity. A lot of the functions that they in our office as their agent would conduct would be grant administration, digital equity plan implementation, updates to the digital equity plan, and evaluation of plan and grant implementation. When you look at the next level there, and what was the subject of the inquiry over the last month is the CDT envisions that, as suggested in the state digital equity plan, that there will be some bucket of centralized services or universal tools and resources that will be procured or developed to support the digital equity plan implementation. And that would, potentially be like a digital equity assessment and training platform. The second bucket would be really endeavoring, knowing that a number of state agencies have digital inclusion programs, really doing market research and discussions with those agencies to see which we could potentially fund out of capacity grants to have an impacted scale for both focus on covered populations and driving measurable objectives and outcomes that are listed in the plan. And then the third bucket is really designing the digital equity capacity sub-grant program that will provide entities and coalitions funding to implement the digital equity plan and focusing on key activities outlined in the plan. And that really would focus on like broadband adoption campaigns, digital navigation, digital literacy training, technical support, etc. Next slide, please. we did want to remind folks that, we have not yet received the award, but based on the federal requirements, you can see a pie chart here that shows the potential eligible uses of funds that this state can spend out of the capacity grant dollars. And you'll see that the sort of yellow or gold bond, up to 20% of the total capacity grant can be used to update and maintain the digital equity plan. Next, up to 5% could be used on evaluation and effectiveness of those efforts, up to 3% on administration, up to 10% on subsidies, and really the remainder would be on programmatic to really support state and local digital equity initiatives and programming. Want to note, because this came up in the last meeting, that the percentages that are not in the green pie are really the ceilings that the NTIA has set on those. We had indicated in our past meeting it is our intention to try to reduce the amount of money that we leverage and spend to support those efforts, so that as much as we can within both the federal guidelines and our capacity can allow us to use as much of the total funds for the green portion you see here on the pie. And so if we go to the next slide, really the last thing that I wanted to note is that when we mentioned the questionnaire, very thankful to those of you who responded to the questionnaire and acknowledge that some people may have not. This is going to be an opportunity today for us to go over some of the learnings that from the folks who were able to share their feedback with us, and also provide an opportunity for those who might not have contribute to the questionnaire but want to continue to the conversation, and particularly help inform us on how we design the program. And so that questionnaire focused on the centralized service portion of the program design, the state digital equity capacity subgrant design, and stakeholder engagement and collaboration. And those are going to be some of the main topics that my colleagues are going to discuss moving forward. So I will conclude my remarks. Again, I just say welcome. We're so fortunate here in California to have such a mature and diverse and active and accomplished digital equity ecosystem that we're really honored to be here and to continue to further inform how we shape this program and move forward together. We can take the slides down, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments from folks, but also want to note that the subsequent portions of the agenda are going to dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah, great, Scott, and thank you. And thank you all for joining. I did want to note there is a question about funding, and did want to share that a good significant piece of our presentations today will be on the capacity subgrant program. So we'll answer that question when we do get to the capacity subgrant program. But I did want to have Anne join real quickly, if she could just share what she typed in the chat, which was a question around just the slides and functionality of getting this information post the event. Anne, can you share kind of where the individuals can find that?
Of course. The event's recording, including the audio recording, the video recording, presentation slides, and transcript, will be available on our Broadband for All portal. I linked it in the chat, and I'll drop the link throughout because I know some folks hop in and out of the meeting. So we usually remediate that for accessibility before posting it online. So give us, 10 days to get it together and get it online for you all.
Great, thank you, Anne. And then did want to share, this is a more bi-directional meeting, meaning all participants have access to both video and audio, mute, unmute. So if you are interested in raising your hand and sharing a comment, now's a good time. If there are any additional information that or comments those would like to share before we move on to the presentation. Okay, not seeing any, kind of opening us up. It makes sense. So we'll have Amanda. Can you bring up the? Oh, hold on. I do see one hand. I'm gonna Gina. You are more than welcome to unmute and share your comment.
Okay, great. Thank you for, I posted a question, but I think maybe you didn't see it. My question is digital training going to be provided by one source, or will organizations be able to provide their own digital training? Specifically, I'm looking for an answer to online digital training.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ms. Gates Lopez. And we haven't fully made a decision on that, but what we heard through the planning process is that a combination of both, that there may be a centralized digital literacy training platform or platforms that could be used to support local entities, but that local entities who received subgrants may also want to, have some individually, customized training there. So we're trying to be as nimble, as flexible as possible. And that's really kind of why we've brought folks together and are taking this deliberative approach to how we design the grant program.
Great. Oh, okay. We're working on that now. We have been doing that with the CASIF grant. It's been very successful, and we actually got our 2-year grant and completed it in 6 months. So people really like it, and we're able to support. So hoping we can have further conversation on continuing that.
Absolutely. And I think there's probably, when we get to the centralized service down, down the road, would love to hear about that. Congratulations on completing your grant in the, shortened amount of time, and look forward. Thanks.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you. So I'll pause one more moment, and then Amanda, can you bring up the centralized services questionnaire? Yep, perfect. So now I'd like to introduce Alex Bond, who's principal of Broadband Equity Partnership, to lead us through the questionnaire analysis overview. Alex?
Thanks, Cole. Hi, everyone. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to kick things off with the questionnaire results, just wanted to share a high-level overview of our total pool of responses. So a total of 94 respondents completed the questionnaire, and they come from 29 counties. In addition, we had 10 respondents from tribal communities, 13 from rural constituencies, and 4 from digital equity stakeholders and practitioners coming from out of state who have been involved in the process. So this is total respondents by geography. And then next slide. These are the respondents by organization type. So as you can see here, we received a substantial number of responses from regional and local CBOs, as well as local EDD branches and workforce development boards, tribes, city and county governments, as well as broadband consortia. So appreciate the diversity in the responses here from different organizations. Next slide. Yeah, so going into the questions, as Scott mentioned, the questionnaire was broken up into different sections. So our first section here is on centralized services. And our first question was, asking respondents to rank a couple of options for centralized services in the order of most to least important for their particular organization. And you'll see the options listed here in the order of the highest average ranking. So on average, digital literacy assessment and training platform was ranked highest, followed by broadband and technology workforce development, upskilling resources. Third was technical assistance programs. And fourth was remote digital navigation and tech support. Next slide. So going into a deeper dive into each one of these options, we asked a couple of follow-up questions about each of them. And for digital literacy assessment and training platforms, one of the first questions was asking about what modalities of training respondents preferred as far as, having this platform be able to support. So some options were, being able to support in-person trainings. Another option was being able to support synchronous modalities. So, logging onto the platform and having, training at a specific time, or being able to support asynchronous modalities. So basically your self-paced training and resources. So there was a mix of responses, but the plurality of respondents selected all of the above. So 44% selected all of the above. And yeah, the preference here is for a training platform that would be multimodal and be able to support multiple types of trainings. The second, most common option was asynchronous or self-paced at 19%. Another question we asked about digital literacy assessment and training platform was around, what skills and what curriculum would be important to be included. And this was an open response question, but, in analyzing the responses, we coded for a couple of different themes. So one of the most common themes was for the curriculum to include, training on online safety, cybersecurity, and privacy. So helping folks know have the skills to stay safe online and protect their privacy online. We also had a number of responses mention entry-level office skills, office, productivity software, and many of them, combined this with job search and application skills, particularly in learning how to, put together a nice resume and cover letter. We also had a group of responses talk about training on using specific essential services, online services, and applications, such as online government portals and websites, online banking, and telehealth. And we also had some responses mention the importance of training on the awareness and use of AI. So those were some of the common themes that came out of that question. And the final question around digital literacy assessment and training was around which platform providers or vendors respondents recommended CDT to learn more about or to explore further. And the ones listed here had more than one mention in the open responses. So North Star had more than one mention, had multiple mentions. So did Everyone On, Human IT, and Community Tech Network. Next slide. So that was around digital literacy and training. The next centralized service option that we asked follow-up questions on was remote digital navigation and technical support. And here we asked, amongst this, big topic of remote digital navigation and tech support, which activities or which services would be most important. So this was a select all that apply, question. Folks could choose more than one, but in seeing, the options that there were 4 options that the majority of respondents selected. And that starts with advising on low-cost device and internet offers. So that had the highest number of selections at 73%, followed by connecting to or providing digital literacy training at 69%. Next was assessing individual needs and goals at 58%, and then hardware and software tech support at 56%. Next slide. So on the centralized service option of broadband and technology workforce development upskilling resources, we asked, which types of resources would be most important to support the respondents' organizations. And yeah, it was very popular for folks to select compilations. So compilations of broadband and tech training and education programs, as well as, broadband and tech training certification and apprenticeship programs. Both of those had over 80% of folks select them. The next most popular was training and informational materials. Slide. Technical assistance programs, we saw, what types of technical assistance programs would be most important to support organizations. And we saw that there was a lot of support for funding for subgrantee technical assistance, as well as different types of assistance and resources around grant reporting. So providing templates for grant reporting, providing a set of best practices for grant reporting, as well as providing support and resources around using the grant management system. Those all had, over 50% of respondents' selections. Next slide, please. And lastly, for every single overarching for all of our centralized services, we asked which languages would be most important to provide additional access and support for. And this was another ranking question. So listed in order of highest average ranking. First was Spanish. That had by far the most number of first choice selections. Second was simplified Chinese. Third, traditional Chinese. Fourth, Vietnamese, and then rounding out the top 5 is Arabic. And we also asked about accessibility. So what accessibility features would be most important to be included in these centralized services. And most popular was captioning in other languages at 70%, followed by screen reader compatibility at 60%, and then CART or real-time captioning at 53%.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex. Yeah, no. Sorry, if you have any last things to wrap up.
Well, those are the results for the questionnaire for centralized services, and over to you, Cole.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And so now we'll move on to some discussion portion of the information that Alex just shared on centralized services. So if you would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature. And it's at the bottom of your toolbar under reactions, and we'll prompt you to unmute yourself. And you're welcome to turn on your camera and unmute. Looks like we already have a couple questions. So I'm going to go by order that I see them. And Ralph, please feel free to ask your question.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to comment. My concern is that it looks to me that the sample of responses was pretty small. Considering California's population is quite large, tell me the number shown on that slide as far as how many respondents out of the tens of millions of Californians.
Yeah, we had a total of 94 respondents.
Wow. Would you agree that that's an extremely small sampling?
Mr. Irvine would want to jump in and just kind of go back to the development of the digital equity plan, where we did do a number of surveys, including a statewide phone poll that was conducted through the California Emerging Technology Fund and USC Annenberg School that focused on kind of developing a needs assessment for residents. And then similarly, we developed an online and mobile friendly version of that statewide digital equity survey that was translated into about 14 different languages. And we had 40,000 responses. And when you naturalize or when you normalize and clean the data, it was, tens of thousands of Californians that had, informed that. So the questionnaire that we put out was really intended to seek input and advice on program design from people like organizations who had planned, and partnered with us on development of the plan, but also asking entities who were, part of the pool of eligible entities or organizations that would apply for grants on how we could structure the capacity grant program to best support implementation. So your point is well noted that we do have a very large population here, and focusing on the needs of the covered populations was part of the planning process, and that the intention of the questionnaire was really to solicit feedback from organizations who would potentially be interested in receiving grants to help implement the plan.
Scott, can I also just say that, so the questionnaire was one avenue to get feedback and input, but, that's one of the reasons why we also want to have feedback and input at this session. So, we know that these webinars are very well attended, and we know that there could be a number of reasons why folks who are attending this webinar might not have been able to fill out the questionnaire. So, to the point about, this session being bi-directional, we really want to have enough time and take the time, for folks to bring up additional input or insights on any of these questions.
Great. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Scott. Next hand I see up is Rebecca. Great to see you, Rebecca. Please feel free.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Rebecca Kawuma with the County of Los Angeles. Thank you so much for the update. And I do have a couple of points that I just wanted to emphasize. So happy to see that there was a lot of diversity in requests for language access. I would like to also uplift the importance of having the Khmer language reflected there. I do see that my City of Long Beach colleagues and partners are on this call right now, and we do have a strong Cambodian population within the County of Los Angeles, and majority of them do reside within the City of Long Beach. So although that may not have been a primary language that was selected by the survey respondents, I would like to see Khmer language being provided in terms of digital inclusion resources and services for this programming, please. In addition to that, I also really like the fact that there was a strong emphasis on providing technical assistance for the subgrantees. As everybody already knows, we're in the meat of applying for the Federal Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, and that is a huge task to take on, especially being a county entity and making sure that all of our partners, that many of them are on this call here, feel supported, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to support all of our smaller cities and organizations that would like to apply for funding. So I would like to really hone in on making sure that your entity is able to provide technical assistance for smaller cities and smaller organizations that perhaps maybe cannot participate in federal grant funding because of the requirements, but would like to still apply for digital equity capacity grant program funding, and making sure that we're providing them with resources and support to be able to take advantage of this historic funding that's coming down the pipeline. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. Crystal.
Gina Gates Lopez was.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Gina.
Thank you so much. So some of the things that I did not hear are concerning to me. We've been working on digital equity now for 4 years, first with the city of San Jose, with the partnership, and now with CASF. And so what I'm still not hearing is a baseline. We really need to have a discussion of what is a baseline phone setup necessary, the #1 computer in the world. And so when we talk about devices, we don't talk about cell phones. And we deal with a very poor population, and many of them are dependent on Lifeline phones, and they're just garbage. They're horrible, and using those phones is it's just awful. It's just an exercise in frustration. But so somehow we need to be able to really look at communication. If we are not talking about communication, and it seems like we're just talking about devices, we're missing a step. Also, what I'm not seeing is a baseline computer setup. So what I'm seeing with our seniors is they really aren't getting it. They can go through the digital training, they kind of get it, they did the steps, but they don't know how to set up their computer. So there needs to be that understanding that people do need that one-on-one, where a person goes to their home and helps them connect to the internet, helps them with their devices, and makes it easy for them, actually functional for them. And finally, what I want to say that I'm not hearing is I don't hear anything about the underhoused or the unhoused. We have a big population with our group here that we work with, and we really need to be able to look at how do we serve them, and at the same time, how do we prevent waste or abuse within the project. So for instance, somebody coming to our program and then going over to Catholic Charities and using their program, getting 2 computers, and then who knows what goes on. There's no checkpoint as far as watching where our devices are going. And also there's no checkpoint for us to see if we help John, where is John in 12 months from now? So actually where we're planning for human beings and not just talking about devices. So That's what I want to share.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gates Lopez. And I do just want to underscore the 3 points that I think I heard you said. I think I agree. Definitely on the need for further conversation with the ecosystem on the potential baseline for devices and computer setup. And we're, thinking about how we can do that. Potentially looking at doing a micro questionnaire over the next month regarding to those. So would really welcome anything that you or others would want to send us to help shape those. On the issue of the unhoused, we tend to agree. And during the planning process, the ecosystem had shared that, I think to provide context, the funding through the Digital Equity Act really defined covered populations in eight, 8 specific covered populations, covered households, aging individuals, 60 and above, disabled, incarcerated, those with language barriers, members of racial and ethnic minority groups, in rural areas. We do acknowledge that there are, some populations that don't fall into those that are of importance to both the state and state agencies in our ecosystem. And as we kind of clarified that, in order for us to meet the obligations of the state digital equity capacity grants, we are going to have to leverage the funding to focus on the covered populations as defined by the Digital Equity Act. That doesn't mean that we're not gonna, focus on how it just it represents one of those challenges. And then lastly, appreciate your comment about waste and abuse, and that's definitely going to be, a big focus of how we design the program, and particularly its interaction with other programs.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Okay, Crystal, last hand raised that I see for now.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Good to see you again, Scott, as always. So specifically what I want to ask or put up for conversation is that many of us are participating in both the competitive and the capacity work. It is going to be really hard and a lot of unnecessary work to apply for things in the competitive that you may or may not intend to host as capacity grant. And how would you suggest those of us, we've been partnering for quite a while, how do you suggest we navigate that? Because we've seen the need as we've articulated it to you coming together in these meetings over the past 2 years, right? So we understand where those requests for centralized services come from. And we've accounted for it because you asked us to fill in the gaps of what we saw was needed. And there's going to be some overlap, and transparency and clarity would be helpful as we try to move forward with our competitive applications that should complement the work of the state.
Yes, well, I absolutely agree with you, and it's always great to see you, Ms. Rawls. So thanks for being here. I think that what you have shared just underscores the challenge that we all face, and why the digital equity plan at the end of the planning process said that collaboration and alignment and cooperation are going to be so critical, because it's like, how do we with such a big task here in California, make the best, most efficient use of resources when there are multiple buckets of funding, and not duplicate efforts. And so that is a guiding principle for us. So I would note that we have been unable to to up until last week when the competitive grant notice of funding opportunity was released to understand what its focus was going to be and to determine how it might differ from the state capacity grant program or other programs. So probably like, you know, many of you were reading through the NOFO, analyzing it, creating our, and so there is a section later on where we're going to talk about what we've learned about the competitive grant program and kind of start a conversation, but we fully intend to continue this conversation in next month, convening that's more of a, you know, a pointed conversation about how we do that coordination and prevent duplication.
Great, thank you. And then Scott, before we move on, there's two questions that I'm going to kind of put into one category, which is devices. So questions about, is there funding for devices and procurement and distribution? And then kind of a larger question about engaging with multiple distributors and negotiating pricing. So really just understanding, how does the capacity grant support subgrantees engaged in devices, and will device procurement be a part of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, so Ms. Gates Lopez brought up the need for devices. And so devices are a consideration. I mean, looking at the state digital equity plan, we do know that there's a targeted, you know, a relatively small but significant percentage of the population that needs device assistance. And so, you know, that's a consideration of how we design the program. And now that the competitive grants are out, you know, that's going to further inform how we develop the program. But as I mentioned when Ms. Gates Lopez said this, we are considering putting out a questionnaire on the device issue specifically about, you know, potentially what are price points. You know, we know during the planning process that particularly, you know, that all devices are not, you know, the best for different, you know, members of our population. So we're going to do more market research and more convening with you all to better understand that. And the larger question, Cole, that yes, part of that would be, you know, developing a device, you know, strategy for the state, which would include, you know, speaking with manufacturers and getting a sense of that. So again, we haven't received the capacity grant yet. We'll have 9 months from the date of the award to identify how we're going to expend all that funds. There's a lot of joint planning that we all are going to be doing together between that time. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Alex. I think that wraps up the questions that we got for this part of the discussion. There's one more question about rural, but I think it'll be kind of covered in the capacity subgrant conversation. So would love for Amanda to bring the slides back up and pass it back to Alex to kind of share about capacity subgrant program. Alex?
Thanks, Cole. Yeah, so next topic for the questionnaire was around capacity subgrants, and we had questions to, you know, gauge input and feedback on a number of aspects of the capacity subgrant design. So the first aspect was around uses and activities that the subgrant program could fund. So we asked folks to rank different uses of capacity subgrants in order of highest need in the communities that they serve or represent. And again, listed in order of highest average ranking are the results here. So first was digital literacy and skills training that had the highest average rank, you know, a lot of first and second choice selections for that one. Second was digital navigation and tech support. Third was device distribution. Fourth, developing and refining local digital equity plans. And then fifth, broadband adoption campaigns. Sixth, computer labs at community centers, and seventh was workforce development training and apprenticeship programs. So those were the allowable uses and how they ranked as far as importance for their community. Next slide, please. Another aspect of the subgrant design that we asked about was selection criteria. So the NTIA in the capacity grant NOFO specified 4 criteria that states should, you know, evaluate and consider when looking at subgrant proposals. So they are focusing on covered populations, ability to produce long-lasting and meaningful change, having measurable implementation strategies, and then having a plan for meaningful stakeholder engagement. So we asked, the questionnaire and the stakeholder community within the questionnaire, are there other criteria that CDT should consider? And this was an open response question. So we coded by, different themes and different types of, results that are coming up. So first major theme was around strength of and depth of partnerships and collaborations. So making sure that in these applications, there's plans for partnerships across different entities that could serve covered populations, that they could bring the expertise in digital equity programming. Another common theme was around having, the demonstrated ability to produce results and impact, not only on closing the digital divide, but also greater, societal and economic outcomes. Another common theme was having cultural and linguistic competence. So making sure that, when we're evaluating proposals, the folks who are, planning to serve the covered populations and the communities, have that experience, both the cultural competence and, the language capability. Another, common theme was having a sustainable plan. So making sure that the program and the activity that's funded by the capacity subgrant could sustain itself and, continue after the funding ends. And then, the last one I'll mention here is experience and capacity. So having experience with digital equity programming and capacity to, manage federal and state funding. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that was selection criteria. Another, set of questions we asked was around allocation. So, just looking at the funding amount that California received in this first tranche and looking at the size of the state and, the size of the need, we asked for organizations' perspectives on how CDT should consider allocating the subgrant funds. And some of the choices were, allocation by depth of impact towards the measurable objectives that are in the plan. Another option was, allocation by cover populations. Another option was by geography. And then the last option was policy outcome area. So, education, workforce development and economic development, health, et cetera. So the results here were pretty varied. No choice got the majority of respondents. But, the plurality was all of the above. So about a third of respondents selected all of the above and thought it would be important for CDT to consider, each one of these criteria in its allocation. The next highest choice, the next most common choice was, I'm not sure, this needs more discussion at 23%. So really welcome folks to, chime in during the Q&A and discussion portion of this and, share more about their perspectives on how CDC should consider allocating subgrant funds. Next slide. So more about allocation. We asked, what is the geographic unit that would allow for the greatest coordination and impact? And, again, very varied and diverse results here. No choice got the majority of respondents. But, as far as plurality, the most common and most popular results were, or choices were, I'm not sure, this needs more discussion at 28%. And that was actually tied with counties. So folks who thought counties would be the geographic unit that would allow for the greatest coordination impact, that also had 28%. And then third was broadband consortia regions at 18%. So again, definitely welcome, more insights and more perspectives during the discussion portion of this on this particular question. And then as far as what should CDT consider if thinking about, funding for geographies, we did get some clearer preferences, amongst the questionnaire respondents here. So 70% of respondents, selected or suggested that CDT should consider relative lack of broadband availability and adoption in geographic allocations. And then 61% suggested that CDT should consider total members of covered populations within geographic allocations. So those two had, more than a majority of respondents, selecting them. Next slide, please. So moving on to some grant administration questions, we asked what kinds of technical assistance or support for applicants would be helpful during the application process. And yeah, a lot of support for webinars at 83%, a lot of support for office hours at 82%. And, folks also wanted FAQs, and some folks wanted in-person workshops at 53%. And as far as preferred options for payment to grantees, so yeah, within this pie chart, the 50% slice, that is advanced payments. So half of the respondents, would like to see advanced payments as a payment option, followed by fixed payments based on accomplishment of milestones at 27%. And then as far as preferred invoice submission timeline, 44% of respondents wanted to see quarterly invoice submission, and 35% wanted to see monthly invoice submission. And next slide. So here's our last slide on the capacity subgrants. There were a number of questions around organizational capacity and interest. So, we asked the respondents, if they had the personnel, organizational infrastructure, and capacity to manage a subgrant, a capacity subgrant, and 73%. So, overwhelming majority said yes, they do. They have the capacity to manage the grant. And that goes into the next two questions that we asked, which were around interest in applying for both the Digital Equity Competitive Grant and the Capacity Grant. So, this goes to Dr. Raw's point about, just interest in both amongst the stakeholder community. And we're seeing that in the questionnaire results as well. So the majority for both were interested in either leading a grant proposal, partnering with others on a grant proposal, or, flexible on, doing either of those approaches. So either leading or partnering. So on the Digital Equity Competitive Grant, 49%, said they were open to doing both of the above, and 15% said they would be open to partnering with others. Similar results for the Capacity Grant, where 47% said they would be open to both leading or partnering, and for this one, 12% said they would be interested in leading a grant proposal. So yeah, interested in hearing more about interest and questions, and as was mentioned, we have another section coming up focusing on the competitive grants.
Thank you, Alex. So again, we're going to move into a discussion about the capacity grant subgrant program. If you'd like to raise your hand and speak, you're more than welcome to start that process, and we'll prompt you to unmute you. Additionally, as Alex has been sharing, I am going to put a question in the chat that we would love, kind of, if there's opportunity for a conversation within the chat on additional considerations and elaborations or insights on the capacity subgrant program. Happy to have you there. And so first, we'll start with any hands raised. Rebecca, go ahead.
I feel like I always have my hand raised, but that is life. Thank you again for answering my questions. First and foremost, I just wanted to comment in terms of the uses and activities. I definitely like the fact that it's pretty much spread out in terms of digital literacy, digital navigation, devices distribution. My recommendation to CDT is that all of these digital equities be considered, be considered as part of a holistic approach. So obviously you cannot just do broadband adoption and ignore some of the other areas as well. So we need to have that coordinated approach as we're looking at these different activities, just something for you guys to keep in mind. It was also interesting to see the partnerships case as well, obviously with the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, as we're all trying to navigate, as Dr. Rawls also shared as well. That program does have a strong partnership component. So there's an authorized representative as well as subrecipients that fall under that. One of the things that we've been hearing in the digital equity space nationwide is that there are a lot of organizations that have issues joining a partnership and they don't know where to go. So I would definitely recommend, if you guys are going to go through that approach, that there's avenues and mechanisms for organizations that perhaps aren't part of a digital equity coalition or a committee, for them to receive resources and support to be able to join that, if that will be considered a requirement. And then I definitely echo the support that is given towards counties. So the County of Los Angeles, being the most populous county in the country, is supporting many of its cities, organizations, nonprofit entities to be able to apply for the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. So I would definitely echo continuing a similar approach if appropriate. Obviously, you'll need to vet that out from region to region, but definitely, I feel like counties do have the ability to support this work and can also support smaller cities and organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Great. Now I'd like to call on Ralph.
Good, unmuted. Broadband for all, right? Operative word is broadband. To what degree are all of you, dedicated individuals at CDT, making sure that there's coordinating activities with the CPUCC, who's managing the BEAD program? Because if you don't have the broadband connectivity to all of these communities that need to be served, nothing's going to happen, whether it's wireless or wired. So I would hope that you have a dedicated person or persons that are monitoring and tracking, like I am, because the CPUCC is just going through the challenge process and there's a number of steps. There's got to be a synchronization going on, because without the ability to move the data via broadband, instead of what unfortunately is a difficult situation, much as was described with utilizing mobile phones, okay, there's got to be that coordination, because there's a lot of money over in the BEAD program that's being deployed as well. So that's my hope. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Ibarra. And you know, we definitely understand that like, you know, California is a big state, and that there's many you know, individual residents and stakeholder groups and organizations that are committed to digital equity that may be jumping in at a different point in the continuum over the last couple of years. And just wanted to say your point about collaboration and coordination between the Department of Technology and the PUC is something that there are, you know, kind of multiple formal and informal touch points where we're coordinating. So generally, you know, we have our statutory public meetings at the California Broadband Council where, you know, since 2010, we've been coordinating broadband deployment and adoption efforts at the statewide level. Once, you know, the state invested significant amounts of resources for the middle and the last mile programs in Senate Bill 156. The Department of Technology, you know, is the middle mile, CPUC's the last mile programs. We're coordinating, you know, weekly, if not daily, on making sure that those investments connect up to do the connection to the home. And then I would say, you know, another, you know, significant effort is that over the last year and a half, we did joint digital equity and BEAD, you know, planning with the Public Utilities Commission. So from our outcome area working groups to our planning group and our regional workshops, that was done in coordination with the Public Utilities Commission. And we meet, you know, on a weekly basis, if not, you know, more frequently, to make sure that our efforts are aligned. And just thank you for giving voice to the continued and ever-present need for us to you know, coordinate and collaborate, because it's about access, affordability, and adoption, and all of the, you know, dimensionality and the barriers to adoption. So appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Ralph and Scott. So, did want to bring up two questions that are in the same flavor before I get to Gina, which is about subgrants. And so the question is, how much funding is expected to go out in subgrants? What will be the award range for each subgrant? And that was a question. But then Malika added on in a separate question and accurately described that the competitive grant NOFO indicates a range of 5 to 20 million per grantee. And so following that same question, does CDT have a current estimation for project and grant range?
Yeah, and thanks for the question. There is not a projected allocation, because what we are right now in the period of you know, seeking stakeholder feedback and input on how we design the program. And part of that is the allocation criteria. If we go beyond what the NTIA used to determine the state's allocation, the kind of the other metrics, and then how this fits into the other programs out there. So everything we're hearing here today is going to be factored into the development of the subgrant program. And you'll see later on in the slides, we fully intend to develop a draft capacity grant program proposal and put that out to public comment. So there's much more iteration engagement to come before we figure out what the allocation amount is going to be.
Great, thanks, Scott. Now I'm going to pass it over to Gina. Go ahead, Gina.
Hi, I just wanted, I wasn't going to speak until the gentleman spoke about connecting with other agencies and internet. So here's my thought. We work in Santa Clara County with our grant, and it is very difficult for us to convince people to even work with us with digital literacy and then get a computer. I mean, come on, you're getting a computer, so it's really great. But what's going on, and what I'm hearing from moms, and mostly moms that we work with, is why would I want to do that when I can't even connect to the internet from where I live? So it seems to me, and what I've learned, is that we need to be able to provide them something so that they can engage now, and we can't wait for these towers to be built, because what's happening is the disparity is getting further and further along, and not just for the moms, we're talking about the children. So is there space within this realm to help people with their data, or help people in some way connect from their homes when the towers are not available? I think it's something to consider strongly.
Thank you. We appreciate those comments, Ms. Gates Lopez.
Great. And Scott, noting we're starting to run up against our time, and we want to continue to make sure there's enough to get through all the information, we'll bring the slides back up, and I would like to introduce Ann Wynn of the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy, who's the Engagement and Operations Manager, to present on stakeholder engagement. Ann?
Thank you so much, Cole, and thanks everyone for being here. Next slide, please. As you have heard, we split our questionnaire into 3 parts. The third part of it is really about seeking additional feedback on how we can engage with you all much better in the implementation of the SDEP, right? So a few questions we asked were on the statewide planning group, which is this first slide right here. Many common themes for improvements, including improved communication about meetings, more time for discussion or questions, which you've seen we're already implementing to make sure that there's discussion after each agenda item. Improved representation and diversity of attendees. Could definitely use all your help with collaborating on outreach for that. Improve accessibility, improve meeting content, and jumping right over to meeting frequency. Majority actually agreed to keep the frequency the same as we have done as the statewide planning group, going into the statewide implementation group to have it on a quarterly basis. So just keeping that brief, and we can definitely talk more about this in the discussion. Next slide, please. As for the outcome area working groups, and if you remember, these are the 6 outcome area working groups that we had during the planning phase. Again, when we ask about if there are interests to change configuration, majority of feedback said no change to configuration and keep it the same. Preferred meeting frequency, again, to keep it as quarterly of 4 times a year. So last time we had much less time to meet with everyone. So we met once every month for, I think, 4 or 5 months. So this would actually give us the opportunity to spread out the outcome area working group, right? If that's of interest. So yeah, next slide, please. And a follow-up to that previous question about the outcome area working group, we started with the original 6, and we add on a few topics that you all gave feedback and selected as potentially having more impact in informing the SDEP implementation process. So as you see here, the majority did choose workforce and economic development, but equally important is digital literacy in skills and training, digital inclusion, which was one of our 6 outcome area working group in the past. There's also broadband adoption, education, essential services, accessibility and civic engagement, devices, digital navigation, healthcare, and tribal collaboration. And a few others chose the option of other as well. So wanted to share that, and we can definitely talk about more about it during discussion. Next slide, please. And when we asked about community advisory group, which is as we are exploring the development of the advisory group, which is self-identified members of covered populations, to bring out the voices and concerns of residents to CDT and inform on implementation of SDEP. A few suggested successful models are listed here. So thank you for those who provided these input. A few that I'll read out loud here is in-person focus group, design thinking sessions, community foundation for Monterey County, climate equity working group at the City of San Diego, the Black Mothers Board for the African American Infant and Maternity Mortality Initiative of Los Angeles County, and the Inland Empire Fair Chance Coalition. So we'll definitely do our desk research, but if you have others successful models to share, please feel free to add that in the chat when it is enabled. Next slide, please. And when we asked about the Broadband for All portal, some common themes for improvement include including more community spotlights, improved user experience, increased visual content, updates and knowledge sharing of best practices, simplifying the language, and update more frequently. So we hear you, and we'll take this into consideration. Next slide, please. And lastly, for the monthly Broadband for All email update, I'll make sure to add the link in the chat to subscribe. But some of the most commonly mentioned themes for improvement and content, again, we hear community spotlight and features a lot. So it's showing up again here on the email update, concise content, local or regional information, sharing best practices, stakeholder engagement opportunities, as well as resources for CBOs. So thank you for the link. So yeah, definitely do subscribe, and we are striving to continue to improve our communication to you so that you join our discussion like these and, sharing best practices. So I think that's the last of my slide.
Great,
Now
thank you,
open
Anne.
up for discussion.
Yep. So let's move on to the discussion portion of the questionnaire analysis on stakeholder engagement. Again, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the raise your hand feature and we will call to unmute you. Additionally, Anne is going to put a question in the chat to kind of further discussion on if there's any additional considerations, any elaborations or insights on results and takeaways on stakeholder engagement, and would love for you to continue to have a discussion in the chat. Crystal, please feel free to unmute.
Hi, thank you. One of the things about stakeholder engagement and the use of language is the readability index that I've mentioned a few times in my sharing in comments over the couple of years. And so as I rely, like many people, on the newsletters to quickly summarize what is massive volumes of information for my community partners to consume, having bullet points in a readability index that aligns with minimally gunning fog, and I've provided that report to you guys, where when I read it, I can turn it around and get it out to the community in time for them to be able to react and give feedback, could improve survey responses, and could get more diverse opinions and people able to consume the information. I do very much rely on those newsletters that you send, given the amounts and volume of information. So I hope that you will consider seriously that community work involves us being able to communicate with the community.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that, and we'll endeavor to improve in that area.
Thank you. Any additional hands raised or any comments that anyone would like to bring forward? Yes, Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll keep this one short and sweet, but I'm very happy to hear about the community engagement aspect. And as I outlined in the questionnaire for your team, it would be great for you guys to consider equitable community engagement strategies when engaging with communities. So making sure that all the community engagement barriers are being addressed. And I would even recommend offering some type of compensation, whether it's a stipend or a gift card, to honor the community's time for the input that they're providing when engaging with a government entity. And I do have some best practices as well from my previous organization. So happy to share and discuss that with your team if you guys are looking for equity-centered community engagement best practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Great, thank you. And Carrie?
Yeah, hi. Oh my gosh, Rebecca, that is a great offer. I think that was you that just spoke, because what I'm feeling from this particular group of people is that the State Digital Equity Plan was concocted or written by CDT after all these community meetings and stuff. And there's still a lot of folks, especially on this call, who may not have known about that original process and are super eager to join us in creating responses. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot of right now is how we might be able to form coalitions and how we might be able to collaborate, both on the competitive grants at the federal level, but more specifically within California. There are loads of people on this call that I know and I recognize, and some of us have gotten together to discuss what we might possibly collaborate on. But I'm really looking forward to somebody kind of figuring out how we're going to collaborate, what that's going to look like. Is it more regional meetings? Is it more meetings through people who serve the same communities? Are the state agencies, for example, CDA, I see you on here, Brian, are you going to convene a group of people outside of the AAAs, like everybody who's been working on the CDA funded programs, to see how to explore how we might work together? And so I don't know if the state is taking a lead on convening partners, or if it's something that we could be or should be doing ourselves. So it's not really a question for, Scott and Cole and Alex. It's more kind of a question for everybody else, about how we might think about what are our next steps for working together? Because that's what I'm really looking for, is what are our next steps to work together? And in addition to these very specific strategies for serving our communities, identifying those next steps might also help us identify which collaborative tools and capacity building services we need.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And it looks like you might have your first step in the chat if you look at the chat. We're going to do one more hand up, Mimi, and then we'll move on to talk about competitive grant. Mimi?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And my apologies for running in late. I think everybody's meeting is running late today since we're all being so productive and ideas are just flowing. The only thing I would urge, I am super open to working collaboratively in a group, especially in the Northern California region. We are in Santa Clara County. But I would ask that whatever we do, I don't want to create another process that is just so convoluted. And there's a lot of wonderful organizations that are emerging. We're not the multi-million-dollar groups that do this work. We're emerging organizations. I will mention Gina. Gina's here. She has her group, and we're both kind of working in the same area. There is more than enough work for her and I to exist in Santa Clara County, along with other folks. The only thing I would urge, based on our experience with the KSEF funding, is that the reporting can be a lot for an emerging organization. I think it's almost a full-time job for myself to just prepare the reporting. So I would love to sit in the conversations on seeing what we bring, how we can create a win-win situation that serves our community, but that also isn't so difficult for an emerging organization. The digital problems that we're having and the lack of access require new approaches and innovative thinking. So I would love to be in a conversation to see, how do we get partners and emerging organizations that are working in this field that doesn't create more work for us, but also is transparent in the way we're spending public money. So please add my name to the list, and I'm sure Gina will support that. The KSEF, it took 6 months to get funding and going back and forth, and not everybody can afford to spend money on the front side and then come back and get reimbursed. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mimi. Acknowledged and heard. I did want to note there's a question Anthony is asking. There's a lot of uplifting about application and timeline. Do want to note that's one of our last remaining slides. So let's talk about competitive program, and then Anthony, I think we'll get to your question. So Amanda, if you could bring slides up, and then I'd like to introduce Sean Doherty, who is the director at Broadband Equity Partnership, to talk about the NTIA competitive grant program.
Thanks, Cole. Amanda, if you want to go to the next slide. I'm just going to spend a few minutes doing an overview of the third and final grant program that has come out of the Digital Equity Act, part of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that was passed in 2021. The competitive grant provides for $1.25 billion, of which $750 million is being made available for this current NOFO. So we were really excited to see the Notice of Funding Opportunity, the NOFO, just as I talked too many acronyms, was released a week ago, a few days earlier than statutorily required. And I hope we'll put a link to the NOFO in the chat so that everybody has access to that if they don't currently. And again, there's $750 million made available for this grant program. NTIA in that NOFO has identified ranges of grants from $5 million to $12 million. They will accept applications outside of that, either higher or lower, but you will have to do a little bit of extra explaining as to why you're outside of that range. In addition to that range of funds, the 5 to 12 million, NTIA will only fund up to 90% of your activities. So there is a minimum 10% match required. And the NOFO said it will take additional consideration to applicants that have a funding match above and beyond that 10%. And really the restrictions that have been identified is a 10% cap on administration and a 10% cap on evaluation. So those are kind of the broad funding structures by which the competitive grant is being built out of. Just flagging some key dates. The application portal is going to be opening on August 14th. So that is the soonest that entities can submit applications for the competitive grant. Applications are due September 23rd. So the NOFO came out on July 24th. So that is a 60-day application window that they have made available. And NTIA expects to begin issuing awards in the winter of 2024 on a rolling basis. So as those awards are reviewed, go through both a merit and a programmatic review, they will issue the awards on a rolling basis. Amanda, next slide, please. And the notice of funding opportunity clearly identifies a range of eligible entities, from political subdivisions or agencies of states, tribal and native entities, foundations, community anchor institutions, workforce development programs, and then partnerships of any of these entities. And I think that's a key word that the NTIA has throughout the notice of funding opportunity is partnerships. They're really, I think, emphasizing partnerships and the role of coalitions and how this work is not done by just one entity. Amanda, do you want to move to the next slide? And the focus of the programs, this might actually look familiar because this is the same thing as the focus of the capacity grant NOFO, focusing on covered populations, those 8 covered populations that were identified by the NTIA and that we spoke about earlier. That needs to be a focus of an application, a focus of a program. Is it going to be long lasting and produce meaningful change? Is it a sustainable program that you are that an entity is applying for? Is there a measurable is there a measurable implementation strategy? Is there a time limit? Is it reasonable? Is it measurable? Really thinking about those SMART goals, and how is that part of the strategy? And what is the stakeholder engagement? Continuing to engage with community and the entities and the populations that those entities serve will be an important focus of the programs that NTIA funds through the competitive grant. And then really kind of just wrapping out this conversation, again, mentioning that it was a brief overview. On the next slide, Amanda, is these are just some of these are the allowable uses that have been identified in the NOFO. You can develop. Great, thank you. You can identify, to develop and implement digital inclusion activities for the benefit of covered populations, or you can facilitate adoption of broadband for the benefit of covered populations. So really, these allowable uses are being focused and applied to those covered populations. But I do think that there is an interesting component to this, so that NTIA encourages innovative approaches. They're willing to think above and beyond, and to maybe some ideas that are out of the box thinking. And so it doesn't necessarily need to be a long existing program. NTIA is encouraging innovative approaches to apply for this grant as well. So happy to take any questions about the competitive grant program. Again, the NOFO was just released last week, so we encourage entities to take a look at the NOFO and see where your organization might fit in.
Thank you, Sean. It looks like we do have one question from Steve, which is, will free public Wi-Fi qualify for the NTIA grant? And maybe we might want to point Steve in a direction to find that answer.
Free public Wi-Fi. Let me get back to you on that one. There's ways that I could see it fitting in there, but I don't want to give bad advice or bad feedback.
Yep, understood. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
And does anyone have any raised hands or any questions related to the competitive grant? Great, Carrie?
Hey, I thought you all might want to know how we've been thinking about the competitive grant, because we're one of the founding members of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. So hello to all of you out there who are also National Digital Inclusion Alliance members. And so for the competitive grant, we're thinking, how do we leverage the experience that we've had in California and Texas with our partners who are members of larger national organizations? So working with a national partner like US Aging on a application for working with AAAs all over the country, or I can't remember the name of the group that is the community colleges or umbrella organization. And so that's kind of where our attention has been going with the competitive grants. And we're going to kind of organize our California specific approaches with our California partners, but we are kind of taking the experience we've had working with libraries and older adults and other communities, people living in affordable housing. That's the other one. Some affordable housing coalition. We're also working with them, and also looking at like a regional approach with our affordable housing partners who are working regionally, who have properties regionally. How might we support their work? So they're applying for the competitive grant, and we are, for those of you who don't know, as Community Tech Network provides digital skills training and advice for folks who are adopting. So for broadband adoption. So we are seeing how can we fit into their competitive grant, which might include devices or data plans, and what is our piece of the training piece, the basic skills and advanced skills training pieces. So I just thought I would share with folks who might also be in affordable housing, working with older people, how you might start thinking about where are you in their space regionally and nationally, and reach up to the larger regional and national partners and think about how you might be able to work with them on the competitive grants. Although California is a pretty big region itself.
Yeah, I want to thank you so much for that feedback, and I want to harken back to Dr. Rawls's comment. Is there's going to be a really strong need for coordination and collaboration and alignment within California, both on how we design the capacity grant program, and how folks come together and apply for competitive grants. Because I think the focus is we all would like to see California get its fair share of those competitive grant dollars, because we've got potentially the biggest state, potentially the biggest amount of need, the largest amount of need here. And so there's a challenge and an opportunity that the competitive grant is out before the capacity subgrant or the capacity grant or subgrant program have been received or designed. So we welcome and are thankful to the folks who are considering applying for competitive grants that have reached out to us, and would encourage other folks that just give us a heads up on things you might be planning on applying for, and how on the competitive side that might impact how we can shape the capacity grant program.
Thanks, Scott. Gina?
Hi, I just wanted to share with you all, this is a great place to do it, is we do work with folks who are in affordable housing units. And this is the rub, is that I'm finding too many of these affordable housing complexes who say they offer web access. The web access is just inundated because there's so many people using it. It's not enough power to help everyone. So because of capacity is one thing. The other thing that we're finding is sometimes I have to actually go to somebody's apartment and find, well, the internet isn't getting that far. And nobody is checking on that. There's this assumption because that housing development says they offer internet that we can believe it. And we can't. And that's just a challenge that I'm seeing. And I'm hoping that we're going to be able to address it, because we cannot assume that everybody is getting ample internet because of a situation like that. The next thing is I'm a little bit confused. I'm confused in that if we're looking at internet and connecting people to the internet, and with the loss of ACP, and again, I work with a very poor part of our community, they don't have $5 to spend on internet. It's buy food or try to pay for internet. They just don't have it. How can we serve them and within this grant? How can we do that? That's my question.
Yeah, so Ms. Gates Lopez, thank you. You brought so much meaningful input and expertise to the conversation today. I think on the ACP port, because I know we're at time, I just wanted to address that. When we looked at the the allowable uses on the capacity grant side, that 10% of the potential 70 million could go to subsidies. And as we had kind of mentioned at the last meeting briefing that we had on this subject, that in California alone, nearly 3 million residents signed up for the ACP. The total impact of that, of those subsidies, amounted to close to $1.7 billion. And I would, surmise it to say that we're all aligned that absent ACP, our challenge got a little more challenging, and that affordability is a huge issue because for many, as you said, I think you said $5, for many folks, anything more than zero is a challenge. And so, short term, there's work we can do together to help educate folks about existing low-cost offers, and then collectively we can advocate and push forward to some, replacement for ACP, and be prepared to kind of integrate that into our approach, when and if that comes together. But you mentioned a really great point, and ACP is a significant missing arrow now in our quiver moving forward.
Thank you, Scott. Noting that there's quite a few people that are needing to drop off, I'd love to kind of go to the tentative timeline, and then we can circle back to some additional conversation if needed at the end of the timeline. So, Scott, please take us through the close.
Certainly, yeah, we can skip this slide. Let's just go. I think, a couple of people asked about the timeline. I want to jump in really to where we are, which is around the July 24th and thereafter timeframe. So the competitive grant NOFA was just released. I believe Patrick Messick asked the question. We anticipate receiving the capacity grant award sometime on or about August 28th. There will be a native entity digital equity capacity grant opening up on September 25th. If you look at the gray box at the bottom, what we're doing now is kind of the ongoing engagement and collaboration between May 6th and August 30th, and then market research on program design. We are hoping to go out to public comment in the early fall with a draft program design and capacity grant program based on what we learned here, and then finalize sub-grant RFA in the late fall. And then if you go back up to the earlier part of the top part of the timeline here, the native entity digital equity capacity grant closes on February 7th, and a real important date for the state is going to be to finalize the budget and identify all projects or entities that are going to be funded by the capacity grant no later than 9 months after the receipt of the award. And so this is the tentative timeline. And the reason we say tentative is that, as with the allowable uses, we're seeking to reduce the amount that the state uses on administration to put as much into program as possible. And we will endeavor to shorten timelines as much as we possibly can, acknowledging the urgency and the desire for entities to start applying for and receiving capacity grants. And so, Cole, that's it for me. We can take this slide down and answer any additional questions if there are some.
I'm gonna pause a moment to see if there's any questions related to the timeline. There are a few competitive grant questions that are getting answered in a typing fashion. So if you're looking for questions related to, there's a question on the admin cap at 10% for the competitive, and so we did refer them to page 28 and 32 of the NOFO. So thank you, Laura, for that question. Rebecca, please go ahead.
Yeah, going back to, I can't remember if it was you or Scott that mentioned this, but in terms of next steps, would it be appropriate for us, once we've figured out what key activities that we're doing within the digital equity competitive grant program, to let you guys know, so that way you guys can anticipate perhaps what our region is applying for? Would that be correct?
Yeah, that would be really helpful, Rebecca.
Okay.
And I think likewise, when we hear of folks that are putting competitive grants together, and we see, synergies of partnership, we'll, similarly connect others to you or others to appropriate partners that we've heard about. And there's already been some examples of that.
Okay, awesome. So we'll make sure to do that. And we're already, because based on after reading the NOFO, it's very clear that to a certain degree, applicants are required to make sure that there's no duplicate effort. So we'll also make sure that we're doing that in terms of both applications. And then based on your guys' timeline, and this is more of a statement, but it would be fair to say that based on the timeline that we've received from NTIA, they plan on making initial awards starting in 2024, and it looks like that will continue through the end of April of next year. And based on your timeline, we would most likely know if we would be funded for digital equity competitive grant program before your guys' opens up, because it looks like your guys' timeline won't be opening up until like spring 2025 anyway. Would that be fair to say?
It's tentative. We're trying to thread the needle on these so that we can avoid as much duplication as possible. And so,
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Is there any last burning questions on timeline? Great. Scott, I think the majority of kind of the remaining questions are competitive grant and ones that we can follow up. So I do want to acknowledge and respect that we're just about 10 minutes over and allow you the space to kind of close us out.
Yeah, excellent, Cole. Well, again, we just are incredibly grateful to be able to work and align with and collaborate with all of you to close the state's digital divide. We know how important this work is to communities and individuals across the state, and to each of your organizations. We look forward to continuing to benefit from your expertise and knowledge, and are just excited about all of the steps moving forward. So wanted to send you a thanks, and just note that we've mentioned the Broadband for All email update. The QR code that's on your screen right now will take you directly to the email list. We send that out monthly. We do have a Broadband for All website. The URL is in the middle. And then if there's any need to reach out to us, the digital equity email is right there, and we're happy to field responses, answer questions, have follow-up meetings if you so desire. So again, thank you, and have a wonderful day. We look forward to seeing you next month.